those guys have been competing all summer. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to evaluate them really well. They do kind of give me reports on what they think, the specialists, how they would rank each other. But there's a big difference between punting at the Lash practice facility compared to in Beaver Stadium, on national television. Same thing with field goals, the not just kicking field goals on a tee, but the snap, the hold, the kick, the protection, the pressure, the environment. So it'll take some time. The good thing is, there's some things that other positions maybe factor into your decision-making process, but like field goals, it's pretty clear. The two guys or the three guys that are competing for the job, they're going to kick the same exact kicks in practice, and whoever has the better percentage, that is on air, that is in live situations, that's all of it. It's going to be a pretty good indicator for you. Same thing with punting. Where some of the other positions, there's some other, maybe a little bit more nuance that goes into the decision-making process.
Olu Fashanu, can you speak to not only his development as a player on the field, but also as a field?
Yeah, a young man that obviously, had a lot of opportunities this offseason and felt like it was in his and his family's best interest to come back to school. Got one of the highest GPAs on our team. Came from a really good high school program in Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C., which I also think helps. Guys that come from really good programs know how to work. They understand what it takes at our level. So he's matured, obviously, into a player that everybody's talking about. He also has the maturity and the intellect and the work ethic to demand the respect of all the guys on the team and in the room. But I think the other thing that I'm excited about is, we have a responsibility at Penn State to continue to help Olu develop, not only to help our team, but also to help himself. And he is bigger than he was last year, but not only is he bigger, all of his testing numbers have dramatically improved. His bench press, his 40, his vertical jump, his pro agility, all of them while gaining 20 pounds. So I think he's put himself in the best position to play well this year, and then also be able to take those skills and translate them in a place like Indianapolis, maybe at the Combine, and show the type of athlete he also is.
James, I know you can't speak to 2024 signings, obviously, but you recruited the state of Wisconsin pretty well, especially wanting the class of 2022 with Jerry Cross. But obviously, there's some other females going on there. But what makes that state? What resources have you put into the state in terms of recruiting there? And have you seen the talent within the state of Wisconsin grow as well?
Yeah, so we were fortunate to get a young man by the name of Jerry Cross out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Jerry's done a phenomenal job. He's well liked on our team. He's worked extremely hard, and I think it's like anything else, right? Once you get one guy from an area and they come and they enjoy it and they have fun, then that word gets back. But Jerry kind of has gotten this thing started for us. It's a guy that we offered and weren't really sure, to be honest with you, how receptive he would be. And he called to commit, and we talked him out of it, for a couple of weeks to make sure this is what he really wanted to do. He's got great family. His mom and his grandparents, who've all raised him, have done a phenomenal job. But I think it's not a whole lot more than that. We were able to get one kid, and that kid has enjoyed his experience so far. And I think he has played a role in maybe some other guys being interested in this as a possible opportunity.
What's been the value of Ty Howle as a recruiter going off?
Yeah, I think Ty has done a really good job in a short period of time at Penn State, is really establishing himself as one of our coaches that has phenomenal relationships with his current players, is one of 10 lettermen that we have on our staff, which is something I think has been really valuable. But he's also a guy that I think if you are ranking coaches in the Big Ten, is one of our better recruiters. And it's interesting. I think sometimes when people think about recruiters, they think of really extroverted, charismatic guys, and Tyler is all substance. His dad was a high school football coach, so I think he's got a different perspective on it as well. And then also Penn State means a ton to him as a letterman. So he's come in and continued to build our tight end room into one of the better tight end rooms in the country, but also recruiting in general.
James, talking about another letterman, how would you say Dion progressed in his first spring campaign once he played on the outside defensive line coach? How much does it add to you as a coach, being that this was a guy that was winning the players over the way and now he's a very important player?
Yeah, Dion's doing well. I am really proud of Dion. I'm gonna be honest with you. We interviewed him, and I didn't think I was gonna hire him. I think a lot of times in coaching, you view guys. He was a player for me. He was a GA for me, and sometimes coaches feel like players have to leave and then come back. But Dion just kept growing. He just kept growing as a coach, as a recruiter. When it comes to scheme and philosophy, when it comes to technology, all of it. He was just growing and growing. He had really earned a lot of respect from the people in the building. Manny Diaz was a big proponent of his as well. And we interviewed him, and I'm going to be honest with you, it was probably one of those interviews where you interview somebody to basically cover your bases. And we interviewed him and a bunch of established college coaches. We interviewed him and a bunch of established NFL coaches, and he blew them all away. He dominated the interview from that point on. I know specifically myself, I started looking at Dion as a legitimate candidate for this position. From that point, had some really honest conversations with him about what my expectations were. And he continued to check the boxes. And after doing the interview process and realizing that we had the best candidate already in our building that understood the culture, that had the institutional knowledge, that had the community knowledge, had strong recruiting ties, it just made so much sense. And it was funny, I think I was on the treadmill one day walking, and Dion comes in, and you guys remember, he cut his hair. And I'm like, why'd you cut your hair? And he goes, because I wanted you to know how serious I was about the job. And I'm like, just so you know, I would have hired you anywhere. And he's like, oh, you should have told me sooner, But he's doing great. I'm really proud of him. Our players absolutely love him. That was a big factor in hiring him. Our players were behind him 1,000%. The big question obviously was recruiting. He had not done it before, but so far so good. He's been attacking that and building strong relationships and selling why Penn State's been so impactful in his life that I think obviously hits home with a lot of recruits.
Coach, what are your thoughts?
What stood out to you about Adisa's development over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I'm proud. I sit here as a proud father, with these guys, and I look at Adisa Isaac and what he's been able to do out of Canarsie High School in Brooklyn, New York, who did a great job with him. That program did a great job with him, and Adisa showed up, and he's just thrived. He's got an unbelievable mom and siblings that obviously mean a ton to him. I think that's been a big part of his development and maturity as well, because there's been more on his plate, probably from an earlier age than most guys. He's killing it in school and on schedule and ready to graduate. He's got bigger and stronger. I think it's really important for him and for us that he plays over 250 pounds this year. I think our D-line's done a really good job this offseason of getting bigger so we can so we can be more physical throughout the entire season. It's a physical, demanding season, and it wears on you. So being able to start at a really good point and being able to sustain it. But I think he's going to have a big year. I think we got a defensive end room that I'm excited about, and we have the depth and talent to push each other and challenge each other, and to continue to put people out there that are going to be able to not only, put pressure on the passer, but also have the size to defend the run too.
What are your thoughts about getting Michigan at home this year?
Does he look like David Jones's little brother?
I was thinking,
I can see it.
Right? It's a compliment. Yeah. Take a picture so you guys can show.
Michigan at home with both these programs considered serious contenders for the Big Ten championship. Your thoughts on it?
Say it one more time. I apologize.
Your thoughts on getting Michigan at home, given the fact that both of these teams are serious contenders for the Big Ten title?
Yeah, I think obviously, when you talk about college football, home field advantage is a factor, especially when you're talking about in the Big Ten, when Michigan's got 110,000 and we got 107,000. It is a factor. There's no doubt about it, and especially when you're playing a really good team like Michigan, our crowd, our environment is going to have to be impactful in the game. But we hopefully between how we play and our scheme and our players combined with our environment gives us the best chance to be successful.
James, the comments you made to Adam Brenneman about NIL and then the tweets that you made about it and your staff, I wonder about the timing of that. Was there something that kind of clicked as you felt the message you needed to be delivered that maybe wasn't delivered?
Yeah, sometimes you guys ask me really good questions that I'd like to answer, but that it may not always be appropriate to answer in this setting or in our program's best interest. But what I would say to you is Pat has come in here and made a significant impact and emphasized this more to what we're competing against, not only within the conference, but also on a national level. And then I just felt like although we had made progress, it had kind of leveled back off again, and we needed to take that next step at a time where the collectives were merging, which was also an important point for us as well. But while that was happening, we weren't making the progress that we needed to make. And I think the combination of all those things, Pat's leadership, the merging, and then obviously trying to emphasize it where we could as a program and where I could as a program, I think has helped maybe speed up that maturation process in this specific area.
When you mentioned progress with that, are you benchmarking dollar figures, or are you trying to compare? Because the challenging thing with it is the secrecy behind it, right? Like, we don't know what guys are making, we don't know what other schools have because of the competitive part. So what things are you looking to kind of compare or benchmark?
Yeah, you try to benchmark as much as you can with things that have been said publicly. You're using that. The other thing you're using is when you're talking to your current players and they have good friends at other programs. That's a way to gain some information. When you hire new staff, one of the best things I think we do is we do a new staff questionnaire when I hire people after they've been on campus for about a month. I interview them about a ton of subjects. They have to fill out this paperwork. So you're able to gain information like that from people you hire, come from other programs, and getting specific information. You have some people that you may compete with. More times not, you find programs that you're not really competing with, that you have very significant relationships with on their staff, and you can ask them directly what exactly is happening. And then obviously you hear a lot in recruiting. Obviously, to your point, a lot of these things are verbal, but you can learn a lot through talking to a lot of different resources, whether it's high school coaches or trainers or parents or prospects as well, to get a pretty good understanding of what is happening nationally. And then, as you guys know too, some of our current players were offered opportunities, and I say you know this because it's happening all over college football, where our players after the season were contacted, from other programs to transfer, and were offered, deals. So there's a lot of ways to get that information.
Did you think they were going to go? Were you nervous for a second that you were going to lose some guys because of it?
Yeah, I think, obviously before the transfer portal opened back up, everybody in the country was concerned what that was going to look like. But we had a ton of conversations with our players. I think, although we've had some challenges in the NIL space, I do think there's a ton of respect from our players and how we have handled things. And I think there's been some examples of maybe places that were very aggressive early on, which is good, but also if not handled well, it could cause you some real issues in your locker room too.
One of your former players has been in the news a lot recently, and I think Saquon Barkley. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on his contract situation and negotiations, but I'm more so wondering why you think there's such a discrepancy for how high running backs are valued in college football, especially at programs like yours where so many good running backs have played, versus their decreasing value at the NFL level.
Yeah, I talked to Saquon probably 3 days ago. Had a really good conversation. Me and my wife had a really good conversation with Saquon this summer over break. A lengthy conversation, which to be honest with you, we've had a lot of conversations, but not a conversation like that in a long time. So that was really good. I want to be a resource for Saquon and his family, not just during his playing career, but really for the rest of his life. I'm a big fan of his and big supporter of his. All that other stuff with the NFL, I'm not going to worry about that or get into that. He was able to sign a pretty good one-year deal, and I think he's going to have a big year for the Giants, and I think he's going to continue to be one of their better leaders in the locker room and representatives in the community too.
What's back to NIL? What advantage do you think is to have the collective association where the Happy Valley United is working with those other competing collectives from other schools?
Yeah, I think back to Audrey's point a little bit about best practice, so those collectives are all able to share information with each other as well, because that's one of the big challenges, right? You don't necessarily know exactly what everybody's doing. There's no website to go pull up to find, the exact information. So being a part of a group like that, I think there's some advantages.
What's the ceiling on Drew Aller, and what does he have to do to reach it?
So you're talking about our quarterback position and the competition that's going on?
I'm just talking about one of those guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Drew's a talented guy. He was ranked, based on who you talk to. Some people had him as a 5-star. Some people had him as the #1 recruit in the country. 6'5", 242 pounds, can make a ton of throws. Is more athletic than people realize. He lives the position. Really works at it both in the classroom and on the football field. He's changed his body composition. He's stronger, more athletic than he was, and he played in 10 games last year. But for me to sit here and talk about his ceiling when he hasn't started a game in college football is hard to say. I will tell you that probably the thing I was most impressed with last year was his poise when he did get in games. You saw him in the Purdue game. We opened the season, prime time, blackout, conference game, and he got in there and he just looked poised and confident. And all those other things you can develop and train, that's something that's hard to develop and train. You either have that or you don't, and he had it. And he has it.
As NIL evolves, what do you think that next era could or
If I knew he was going to ask a question about NIL, I would have came to you. Yeah.
as it evolves, what do you think the next era could or should look like as far as player compensation, control of your own roster? What do you think the next era might look like?
Yeah, I think everybody understands that college football has changed, and the college football that maybe we grew up with is gone and never coming back. And to be honest with you, I think in a lot of ways that is good. But what I also think this NIL has done, in my mind, has shown how complex these issues that the NCAA has been dealing with a long time and gets a lot of criticism based on rules and enforcement. And sometimes it's fair, the criticism that they've gotten. But the issues are more complex than people realize. And how do you do all these things? How do you do all these things at the NCAA level and then really have the ability to enforce the rules you say that we're supposed to be living by? How much do you need states or federal government to get involved and help with these things? It went to the Supreme Court, and we saw how that went. I think it was 9-0. So, I'm still a big believer in the NCAA. I'm still a big believer in our model, but the model needs to change and the model needs to evolve. And the reality is we need to get all these people in the room at the same time, because I think you're seeing a bunch of bills, you're seeing a bunch of good ideas, and I think all of them warrant consideration and there may be a good idea in them. But the reality is we got to need to merge all the good ideas and find something that it's not going to be perfect for everybody. But it shouldn't be, right? It should be what's in the best interest of the student athletes, what's in the best interest of colleges and college athletics, and find something that everybody can be comfortable with and agree on. But the most important thing, we got to get a bunch of people in the room together and have those discussions with legal representation and all of it. So we're talking about things that are actually realistic and doable.
From your standpoint, in this era of player movement, what is the most difficult thing or biggest challenge of recruiting someone like Drew, who plays behind Sean for a whole year, and keeping him in school?
Well, I think it starts with transparent, honest, real conversations with people. I think if you try to sell people on something that may or may not be realistic, then you're going to have a hard time. I think if you're really transparent, it's kind of like for us, like when kids call to commit, we try to talk them out of it. Like some schools pressure kids to commit and then they decommit and they're upset. I'm upset because I tried to talk you out of committing us in the first place to make sure that this was real. I think it's the same thing with the transfer portal. You got to talk about it. You got to talk about it with your players. You got to talk about it with the parents. Everybody knows, the worst thing you can do in most things in life is the path of least resistance. So being able to have honest conversations about what that looks like for everybody involved, more times than not, I think you're going to like the results and you're going to respect it, and so will they. But if you sell them on something that's not realistic, and then they come and it ends up not being realistic, you kind of put yourself in that situation on your own.
How much more of your time now is spent doing off the field stuff and on the field stuff than 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, I think that's always really been the challenge with college football. We wear more hats than the NFL, right? Whether it's recruiting or whether it's fundraising, whatever it may be. Now, NIL and everything else, transfer portal, so on and so forth. A lot. That's why, to be honest with you, you can make the argument, being an offensive coordinator or being a defensive coordinator and staying in that, or as a position coach and staying true to why you fell in love with coaching in the first place. Because when you become a head coach, it a lot of times it almost forces you to pull away from some of those things that got you into the profession in the first place, unless you're at a place that has such strong infrastructure with all the other things, which there's very few places that are like that, but the infrastructure is so strong in all the other areas that you're allowed to focus the majority of your energy on coaching and developing the kids.
Is that how you keep those lost hours how do you keep those lost hours from impacting the on-field progress?
Well, I guess it's like anything else, right? There's a time and place for everything. So you got to understand, okay, this is spring ball, all that other stuff goes away. That, if other people are going to take on those responsibilities, that's fine, but that goes away, and this is my focus right now. Spring ball ends, I got a couple weeks. Now I'm going to start to focus on these other aspects of the program that need to happen. So you got to try to compartmentalize as much as you can. There's going to be certain times a year where you're juggling a lot of things at the same time, but at the end of the day, let's make sure that we're keeping the main thing, which I don't care what anybody says, is still getting a great education and playing big-time football. And the programs and the players that lose sight of that, they're in trouble.
Coach, the new TV deal, how do you think it's impacting the league? How do you think it's impacting the website?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't spend a whole lot of time on those things. I do recognize that we're fortunate to be in the Big Ten. There's two real conferences that I think are built in a way not only to be the most successful, but be able to sustain it long term. We're fortunate to be in one of those conferences. But besides that, really, all of my focus and energy is on what do I got to do for Penn State to put us in the best position to be successful and to represent Penn Staters everywhere the right way, both on and off the field.
How was Marcus settled in at Penn State? I know it's early, still in the camp, but were you pleased with your early development?
Yeah, I love Marcus. We've been fortunate. I take a lot of pride in hiring people and recruiting people. I think it's the most important thing we can do is bring the right people into our building. And Marcus, is first class person, both on and off the field as a husband, as a father. He's got an unbelievable family. Was a great player. He's had a really good coaching career, and he's come in and really adjusted well. His players love him. He's recruiting at a high level. I saw development this spring. Obviously, we need to take a big step this training camp, and I think between the work that he's put in and the strength staff has put in and the players have put in, as well as some of the new talent coming in either from high school or the transfer portal, I think we're in a position where the discussion is who's the third wideout, right? Well, to me, in my mind, it's changed from the spring where it was who's the third wideout. It's really who's the third wideout, and also who are the guys that are going to be in the two deep to give us a legitimate two deep of guys that we can win with in the Big Ten. And I think the reality is those two things in some ways they're both going to answer those two questions, because I think there's a group of about 4 or 5 guys that all are legitimately competing, whether they're second-year guys or third-year guys in the program that are ready to take that next step and be real guys, and they showed flashes of it this spring, or guys that transferred in. So it's not just who's going to be the starter in that third position, but also who are going to be the backups, at all 3 spots too.
Is the second tight end still an option for that wide receiver 3?
Oh yeah, we're going to play the best guys. So not only are they competing with the wide receivers in that room, they're competing with the tight ends, and our tight end room is as good as any tight end room in the country. So we're going to play 12 personnel. It all comes down to how camp goes with our 11 personnel in terms of, are we 50-50? Are we 60% 11 personnel and 40%, or vice versa, based on what room gives us the best chance to be successful? The thing that's good about our tight end room is it's not like if we go to 2 tight ends, we have to be in traditional tight end sets. That second tight end can play slot receiver and do almost all the same things those wide receivers can. So I think your point is a really good one. That competition is really with those 2 rooms.
Going off of that, Daniel Bryan had one quarterback
Well, Rob's on offense. Yeah, Rob's on offense. I think there's a ton of value of having defensive guys in the offensive room and offensive guys in the defensive room in that analyst role. Again, so you have different perspectives and lenses on how we look at things. And the reality is offensive guys and defensive guys look at the game very differently. So there's a ton of value of having that perspective in the room. Ola, as we all know, especially the people that cover Penn State closely, Ola did a great job when he was the defensive coordinator at Villanova. A lot of people that I know from the DMV that thought very highly of him, so he's a guy I've been kind of tracking for a while. And then Danny, as you guys know, Danny played for me as a quarterback. Been in the CFL for a number of years. Danny was the ACC Rookie of the Year. He understands how we do things. He understands how our culture and how I'm wired and how we think. And I think he's a rising star in the profession. I really do. And we work really hard at following the rules. So by being able now under the new GA provisions to move him from an analyst to a GA, allowing him to coach and kind of be able to take those restraints off of him is going to be not only valuable for Danny and his development, but for our quarterbacks and really for our offense as a whole.
I have kind of a two-part question about Marvin Harrison Jr.
It's good.
Yes. One, who does he remind you of? And two, when you're preparing for him, what do you tell your assistant coaches and what did they tell your defensive back?
Yeah, so who he reminds me of, that's hard for me to say. Obviously, he's one of the more talented receivers, if not the most talented receiver in college football. So that's already a pretty impressive thing to say about any player in college football. He's also obviously an impressive young man, and it comes from an impressive family. So what he's been able to do is special. But I think, what are you trying to do in terms of when you're playing against him? Like most people, you're trying to identify who their best player is, who's their most impactful player, and you're trying to limit their production as much as you possibly can and force another player or another area of the offense to beat you. So for example, if you have Nick Singleton and Katron Allen as your running backs, I would think most defenses are going to say, we're going to load the box, take the runaway based on numbers, and force a first-year starting quarterback to beat us. We're not going to allow the proven commodity to beat us. Does that make sense? Now, that's easier said than done. So that'll be a challenge, and we're looking forward to that challenge. That's why you play in the Big Ten. That's why you come to places like Penn State to play these types of games against these types of opponents.
And talking about one of your tight ends, so what did Khalil Dinkins show you over spring practice and then throughout the summer too, and how has he grown in the time he's been at Penn State?
Yeah, Khalil, I think Khalil could be one of these guys that we're talking about a lot more in Game 5 that we're not talking about now. One of those breakout players that people are excited about, where he's made a couple big plays in games and people are now talking about him and his future. He is big, he is strong, he is fast, and he's matured a ton since he's been on campus and really over the last year. And that's all of it. That's football-wise. He's gotten bigger. He was a little bit undersized up to this point. He's now got the size on, and it's the right size, so he's still as fast and as explosive as he's been. We take a lot of pride in tight end and we take a lot of pride at Penn State in our tight ends being, complete tight ends, not big wideouts, which they are at a lot of places. But I think you guys are going to be impressed the more you get to see Khalil, not only in practice but in games in competitive environments. I think you guys will see him very similar to how we have felt about Tyler Warren, for the last year.
James, as sports gambling become more prevalent in society, what challenges does that pose for a coach?
I wish if you guys could put up signs of what questions you're going to ask before I look at you so I can decide whether I want to go to you. I think, look, here's the reality. These things that we have now in college athletics that we either didn't have before or are more prominent than they've ever been, then we better be aware of that. We can't put our head in the sand. We better have programming on these things and have these discussions and educate our players and our fan base about it. It's important. And to me, in all of these things, there's an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity to have a healthy discussion about what these things mean, not only in society, but also in our program. And then also about choices, right? There's choices that we all make every day, and trying to equip your guys with the information to make the best choices on a daily basis.
For young guys like Nick Singleton and also Abdul Carter on the defensive side, younger guys that had success last season, what's the biggest challenge, the biggest step that you think needs to be taken, not just in the offseason, but also in the camp, to take another big step going forward next year?
Well, I think it's kind of be a strange answer, but I would say is patience. And what I mean by that is I meet with all the freshmen multiple times about the redshirting process. And none of them want to redshirt. They all think they should play. But what I'm trying to eliminate as well is at the end of the year, you wanted to play, but then when you look back at the year, it wasn't necessarily worth it based on the amount of reps you played, especially now that you can play 4 games plus postseason and still keep your red shirt. So I think you got to be very strategic about that. So having guys this year that are going to be able to come in and play, being able to recognize who those guys are as quickly as possible, then come up with a strategy of how we're going to use them. Use them early in those 4 games to say, okay, they're ready, let's keep playing them, or let's shut them down and save a few games for late in the season for injuries. Those things I think are really important, how to recognize them. And then guys last year that had success, how do they take the next step, right? Hopefully we have as many freshmen in this class that impact our team like last year, because those guys had a significant, impact on our season. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, just trying to make that jump from year 1 to year 2 and how much of a difficult it could be to obviously just try to grow from that, right?
Yeah, it's difficult, but what you're hoping as well is this freshman class that comes in is putting the heat on them from behind, that they feel that pressure to keep growing, that they don't become complacent and feel like I've arrived based on what I've done last year. But we also have a program as coaches that we're very transparent about where they're at and what they need to do. And we do have enough competition within the program that if you're not doing your job every single day, someone's going to take it.
There isn't like a baseline thing you set for that then, right?
Sir?
There isn't like a baseline thing, but obviously like a goals, objectives that you want to set.
No, we're not a big goals objective program. We'll talk about things obviously in preseason. Okay, what do you guys want to do? Everybody says, oh, we want to be back here. I get it. That's great. But we spend most of our time doing the things to get here rather than sitting around in a room coming up with those words you used.
2 more guys.
James, do you view Ohio State
Step up to replace Tig.
That's what I'm going to do for now. I'm going to let you guys talk, try to listen to what both of your questions are and say, okay, I don't want that question. I'm going here. I'll come back.
James, how have you seen Keaton step up to replace Tig both on and off the field?
I think the fortunate thing, like when I set up on the stage, we have guys that we got to replace in the secondary. They're huge guys, Tig and obviously Joey Porter. But we played so many guys in the secondary so that it's not like there's a question mark there, but there's guys that can step into that role that have played a ton of football. The thing with Keaton, I would say, Keaton's played a ton of football at Penn State. He really started out as a playmaker who could play wide receiver or defensive back. And although he's had a ton of success and played a lot of games, that playmaking is not what we thought it was going to be the first couple of years. This spring, I saw that from him. those skills that he had as a wide receiver in high school, I saw that coming back. I saw him playing fast and making plays. And really, he's done all the things necessary except that. More playmaking, which is really what Tig brought, right? That guy just made so many plays. The ball loved him, whether it was interceptions, fumble recoveries, whatever it may be. That's what we're going to need from Keaton. You know what you're going to get. He's mature, he's steady, he's smart, he's athletic. Now we need him to make those plays to close that gap with what we've talked about in replacing Tig's production.
James, do you view Ohio State as a rival, and are you disappointed at all that Penn State won't play Ohio State every year going forward?
Yeah, I think I kind of look at those teams in our conference as really good teams that we've competed with for a long time and have had great games. To me, that word is different. I think there seems to be a lot of people trying to create those things. And it's funny, when I first got to Penn State, they were having this discussion about unrivaled. Well, why? Well, we're not an original Big Ten team. We were independent for a long time. Then you join the conference, and then people try to create rivalries that really weren't there. Just like everybody wanted to tell me about our rivalry with Pitt, which I agree with geographically, but literally up till we played them a few years ago, none of our players had ever even seen a Penn State-Pitt rivalry game in their lifetime. So I just think these games are important. They're big games. They're important for the Big Ten. They're important for our teams individually as well. But to me, there shouldn't have to be discussions on is this team is a rival or not. If they're a rival, everybody knows they are, in my opinion.